SLT Mobitel, the connection. SLT Mobitel, the connection.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, warning from a dab hand. Sri Lanka's former representative to the United Nations questions the government's handling of the affairs pertaining to the looming UNHRC session.
This session is going to be the litmus test for Sri Lanka's new government's foreign policy. Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights has been taken hostage by the United States.
Support for the informal sector. State Minister Nalaka Godeheva unimpressed with the high-end tourism versus bulk tourism debate.
Almost 3 million people depend on tourism directly and indirectly. They were all hit during the pandemic. Where are they going to go if they say it is only high-end and restricted to few areas?
Also backs listing SOEs at the CSA.
In the current government, starting from the manifesto, we have made it very clear that we want to list the government institutes.
Awakening memories of a darker past. 15 women had taken oath before terrorist Zahran Hashim to perpetrate suicide attacks in the name of religion. Address the mismatch. The GMOA calls on the government to rectify the disparity between official COVID figures and ground realities. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Sunday the 21st of February 2021.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න. හඳුන්වා දීමේ මිල රුපියල් 350යි.
From Ada Derana, this is Ada Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Kanaka. Now then, Sri Lanka's former representative to the United Nations, Thamara Kunanayagam, believes the looming session of the UN Human Rights Council will prove to be the litmus test of the present government's foreign policy. Addressing an event organised by the Professional National Front, Kunanayagam also claimed that the UN Human Rights High Commissioner's office has been taken hostage by the United States and that it is their agenda to divide Sri Lanka on ethnic lines.
This council session is going to be the litmus test for Sri Lanka's new government's foreign policy. What the government is doing right now is negotiating on a consensus resolution with hostile countries who were the sponsors of 30/1, which has been rejected. And we are now negotiating with these hostile countries on a draft that they have written down. That particular draft has to be of the draft resolution that is being discussed. It must necessarily be based on that report that we have rejected. Now that report of the Bachelet report is on the implementation of a resolution that we have already withdrawn from and rejected. So what is really happening? We have rejected it on the one hand, on the other hand we are negotiating on the basis of what we have rejected, which to me indicates that it's a reinstation, or we are in the process of reinstating a resolution that we have already rejected and withdrawn from. And it's not just a resolution, and it's about legitimizing a logic, the logic behind that resolution. The other important concept in that report, it is already in the 2015 resolution, this concept of transitional justice. It means a total overhaul of the state, which is a fundamental reform of all its institutions, of state institutions and laws of the country and policies of the country, permitting this change to be made with foreign outside interference. Since 2015 we have seen that happening, and the government that is today in power has loudly protested against all these reforms that were taking place and institutional changes that were taking place and the new laws and policies. That was actually what it was doing. It was shifting political decision making outside Sri Lanka and outside the control of the people of Sri Lanka. So you were shifting the control over the economy, you were shifting other decision making with regard to fiscal policies, with regard to land ownership. We know that all the discussion we've had about MCC and BIM Xavier has to do with that, with external intervention, the imposition of a foreign law, which is the Torrance law, the Australian law, on Sri Lanka to privatize the public assets and the ownership of land, take it away from the people and give it to foreign, under foreign control. So Sri Lanka has not rejected those. Sri Lanka has rejected those, the report, primarily on procedural grounds. That it is simply that there was no credible investigation, that there was no substantive evidence. It doesn't say that it is against the Charter to impose sanctions or to use any coercive measures against Sri Lanka. So it's not because what contains the logic of the report, they regret the form of the report.
Sri Lanka's former permanent representative to the United Nations, Tamara Kunanayakam, also believes that the office of the UN Human Rights Commissioner has been taken hostage by the West.
Human rights has become a weapon in the hands of the United States and its allies. So it is not, the discussions in the Human Rights Council, whether it's about Sri Lanka or any other country, is not about human rights. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has been instrumentalized and taken hostage, in fact, by the United States, starting in the mid-90s. The concern of the West is not human rights. What is it? So what is the deal that we are negotiating? What are we negotiating? On procedure? On the form? On the concepts? The logic of it, the system? Or are we also making a deal elsewhere? Because that is what the Human Rights Council is about. And before that, the Human Rights Commission was. Resolutions were moved by Western countries against a particular country because they wanted to get something out of that country which had nothing to do with human rights. Negotiation is okay, but not negotiating from a position of weakness. With a hostile group, we are negotiating on their draft, which means we are negotiating on their terrain. So we negotiate on their terrain, on their draft, because they have written the draft. They call for the consensus. They approach Sri Lanka for the consensus. We are negotiating with them outside the United Nations multilateral fora, because the UN has its own negotiating mechanism, and I have used it successfully in 2011, and that is you have meetings that take place, informal meetings on a draft resolution where everybody can participate, whether all governments, NGOs, United Nations system, we can all participate, and they make comments and on the draft, and they also express their opinion on whether or not they will support it. Negotiating outside that fora, there's also another reason why it is they who want to negotiate outside. It is not in our interest, but they want to do it because it isolates Sri Lanka and alienates its allies. So here you have neutrality. What neutrality really means is Sri Lanka isolated from its friends, and so they can impose any condition on you. The question is that I would like to ask our government leaders at the top, are you going to Geneva with the noose around your neck? They would have put the noose around us here before we arrive in Geneva, and then they will pull the noose when we are in Geneva. So what is it that we should do? We have two options. We can prevent the resolution from being tabled, or we can call for a vote against a draft. So for this, we will have to mobilize our allies. But our allies are already alienated from us. Then we have to work towards internal cohesion and unity, which is the strength of Cuba, by the way. This is the true strength of Cuba. Allies outside and internal unity and cohesion. They will do everything to divide us on ethnic lines, which is what they are doing. It is their agenda to divide us and to divide the country.
Pay just 500,000 rupees to reserve your unit today. Mulberry Residence.
Moving on with other stories. Now it has been revealed that 15 women had taken oath to perpetrate suicide attacks in the name of religion before Easter Sunday attacks terrorist Zahran Hashim back in 2018. The 24-year-old suspect arrested on Friday over her links to Zahran and other terrorists had revealed the relevant information under interrogation. From the 15 women in question, including the 24-year-old suspect, 5 have died during the explosions in Saindamarudhu following the Easter Sunday bombings. 24-year-old suspect Mohammed Ibrahim Sahida was arrested by the Terrorist Investigation Division from the area of Hingula in Mavanala on Friday over her close links to the terrorists who carried out the Easter Sunday bombings, including Zahran Hashim. She is the sister of Mohammed Ibrahim Sadiq Abdul Haq and Mohammed Ibrahim Shahid Abdul Haq, the main suspects in Lord Buddha statue vandalism in Mavanala. The two brothers were arrested after a week from the attacks whilst in hiding at a shoe shop in Gampola, and they are still in remand custody. Their sister too had been taken into custody and interrogated at the time over the terror attacks, but was arrested once more on Friday while she was out on bail. The suspect had made several key revelations, and it is also revealed that back in 2018, she and 14 other women had attended the extremism lectures conducted by Zahran Hashim in the area of Katankudi. She had revealed that all 15 women involved, including herself, pledged before Zahran Hashim to commit suicide attacks in the name of religion. The pledge is identified as taking bayat.
It has been revealed that after the conclusion of such instruction classes, they have been forced to give an oath called bayat. According to that oath, they should be ready to commit suicide at any given time. Accordingly, further investigations are conducted by the Terrorist Investigation Department.
5 of the women who pledged to commit suicide attacks had died in the explosions which occurred in the area of Saindamardu following the Easter Sunday attacks. They are Zahran Hashim's mother, Abdul Sattar Sittiumma, one of Zahran's sisters, Mohammed Qasim Hidayah, Mohammed Zaini's wife, Adam Lebbe Fatima, Mohammed Rilwan's wife, Mohammed Nashat Fatima Nafna, and Assad's wife, Feroza. Meanwhile, 3 suicide cadres who had attended Zahran's extremism lectures are presently in remand custody. Among them are one of Zahran Hashim's sisters, Mohammed Kazim Madaniya, Sadiq's wife, Mohammed Palil Fatima Sahid, and Mohammed Milhan's wife, Mohammed Ahmadullah Fatima Justa. The other 7 suicide cadres, including the one arrested from Mavanala on Friday, are currently in the custody of the Terrorist Investigation Division under detention orders. They are 45-year-old Udumalebbe Farizana, identified as Ghafoor's spouse from Katankudi, 25-year-old Muhammadu Hanifa Fatima Nusra, the wife of one of the close relatives of Zahran Hashim from Katankudi, 56-year-old Mohammed Salih Jafadia, identified as Milhan's mother-in-law from Katankudi, Sayyidu Ahmadu Asmiya from Katankudi, 22-year-old Abdul Rauf Fatima Zara, the daughter of Darul Adar Mosque Chairman Rauf from Katankudi, 44-year-old Abdul Quddasi Sitti Satuna, who is the wife of Darul Adar Mosque Chairman Rauf from Katankudi, and 24-year-old Mohammed Ibrahim Sahida from Hingula, the sister of the 2 suspects in the Mavanala Lord Buddha statue vandalism incident, who was arrested on Friday. Accordingly, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana says that investigations will be conducted to identify others who might have taken the bayat, while also probing to see whether incidents such as the one in Mavanala prior to the Easter Sunday terror attacks had any links to the extremist oath in question. Should Sri Lanka give sole focus to attracting top-end tourists with cash to burn or attract low-end tourists such as backpackers? The answer for State Minister of Urban Development, Coast Conservation, Waste Disposal and Community Cleanliness, Dr. Nalaka Godaheva, is very simple. He believes that tourism informal sector should also be given the chance to earn a living in these troubled times without earnings of being limited to high-end facility owners. By and large, the State Minister believes that the tourism sector should benefit a large cross-section of the society, with the roadside vendors also benefiting from tourist arrivals. His views came while in conversation with Indivari Amwatha on our Current Affairs programme at Hyde Park on Ada Derana 24, where Dr. Godaheva also backed the listing of state-owned enterprises in the Colombo Stock Exchange.
I remember speaking to the chairman of the stock exchange who believes that listing public entities will be good going forward in order to ensure that these loss-making entities, there will be some sort of revival. How do you look at this also as a former SEC chairman?
I was always a proponent of this, listing government institutes in the stock market. But before 2015, from the government then, we didn't have that much of support towards that. There was a confusion. Some people didn't understand the difference between listing and selling. Listing a government institute in the stock market was interpreted as selling government assets. But In the current government, starting from the manifesto, we have made it very clear that we want to list the government institutes there so that the general public can come and get ownership of those institutes. And also the stock market will also grow. And if you look at my ministry, under my ministry there are 7 institutes. One of them is a new company called Selandiva. Now the Selandiva company has been formed to take decision as to on the future of assets like Hilton, Hyatt, Grand Oriental Hotel, and then Waters Edge and so many other state assets will also be brought in. And in the long run, we want to create some special purpose vehicles and list those things.
What will be the purview of this institution?
Some of those institutes, the assets that we have, will be brought under this company, and they will structure them in a manner that will facilitate investments. Some investments will be direct, some investments will be through stock market, some will be debt supported. So that restructuring process is currently taking place, but once we take some of those assets to the stock market, that will give an immediate boost to the stock market. So I think for those people who are interested in the stock market, I would say future is very good.
Double blow to the economy, to the tourism industry after Easter attacks and due to the pandemic. But now decisions are taken to open up the economy. But again, the informal sector seems to be neglected because there are regulations brought by the tourism industry. Yes, this is something I should speak to the tourism authority itself, but I think you might have some knowledge to share with us. How do we look at incorporating the informal sector? Because they were hard hit. They are overlooked because obviously they are not in the system, as we say. They also contributed indirectly to the economy.
The way to some of the discussions that are taking place in the tourism industry, there seems to be a debate right now. What kind of tourism we want in the future? Some people seem to be proposing that it has to be high-end tourism like Maldives. I don't want to interfere into that, but personally, I don't believe in that.
Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the facilities to cater to high-end tourists?
Even if we have, I think that's not the way we should go. Because tourism, to me, in this country, must support a larger cross-section of the society. It can't be just high-end tourist facility owners. When a tourist comes to this country, even the roadside retailer should be able to get a benefit out of that. The coconut seller, the trishaw driver, that is the tourism we want. So you need to strike a balance between high-end tourism and bulk tourism. So then you can create products to cater to these different segments, because Sri Lanka is blessed with so many natural advantages, so we can cater to all these requirements. I hope they will get out of this debate whether it should be high-end tourism or not, and continue what we were doing, promote tourism as a whole, so that a larger cross-section of the society will benefit. Almost 3 million people depend on tourism directly and indirectly. They were all hit during the pandemic. Where are they going to go if they say it is only high-end and restrict it to few areas? We must open up tourism as fast as possible, as President also says. The problem was COVID, because we have to be very conscious of the health regulations, but the strategy now we are going to adapt is the vaccination. We want to vaccinate the entire nation as fast as possible. That has been made very clear internally by the government.
Yes.
If we can tell the world, look, we are a fully vaccinated nation within this year, how much confidence that it will give to the tourists who want to travel? Every year, more than 1 billion tourists travel the world. And they can't go to many countries in the world now. Even so-called developed countries are also struggling with COVID because they have large populations. They can't vaccinate everybody. But we have a smaller population. We can vaccinate everybody. And also we are now quite geared, unlike those days, to control, and people wear masks and they're more disciplined. Not all, but they're more disciplined than they used to be. So I believe this we can use as an edge to attack tourists.
Okay, I want to ask you again about the small man, the informal sector. How do we create a system where they're also brought in, whether we go ahead with the high-end tourists or we strike a balance? Because these two incidents in Sri Lanka, we saw that their entire income, their lifeline, that was attacked.
Solution is numbers, no? See, when tourists come, people find ways to sell their products. I mean, you don't have to go and teach them how to make money. They find their own ways. What we need to do is to increase the numbers. Bring tourists of all categories, top end as well as the backpackers. Right? Don't reject them. The backpackers also cater to a certain segment of this country, but you can't fill the country with backpackers. So that is where tourism ministry has to be smart and strike a balance.
You did mention about taking Sri Lanka's story about vaccination, about this story that the government has ensured that vaccination will be provided to all its citizens. What is the purview of the ministry now in ensuring that we support the tourism industry as a whole?
We are actually helping the tourism industry by creating the environment, building the infrastructure. city development, city beautification, coast conservation, all those things have an impact on tourism. Take for example, before 2014, the changes that are done in the Colombo city, that is where tourists come first. Former Defence Secretary, current President Gotabaya Rajapaksa made Colombo a very beautiful city, and he wanted to take it to the other cities as well. All those things kind of stopped. For the last 5 years, we didn't talk about those things. The floating markets, then the Dutch hospital, everything started going down. They were kind of abandoned. I have restarted those things. Now, very soon, floating market will be reopened. Gafoor building in Colombo is currently being renovated. The old fort city, just like the way Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa wanted, will be developed like an old city. Like when you go to all those Western countries, you will see a beautiful heritage in those areas. And throughout the country, heritage cities are currently being developed further with World Bank assistance. So a lot of work is currently being done. So we will build the infrastructure that is required to support tourism.
Now, the Government Medical Officers Association urges health authorities to offer an explanation with regard to the discrepancy between the number of infections and deaths that take place at ground level and the official figures. It says that the situation had severely inconvenienced health authorities, or in fact officials I should say, and warns that if not addressed and rectified, it could lead to conflict between health officials and members of the public. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's COVID-19 vaccinations has passed the 300,000 mark, with over 39,000 jabs being administered yesterday alone.
According to the epidemiology unit, 530 COVID-19 infections were confirmed from 21 districts yesterday, while 13 more cases of the virus were identified among Sri Lankan expatriates. From this figure, the Colombo district reported 180 cases of the virus, while 116 infections were reported from the Kampar district. The Ratnapura and Puttalam districts confirmed 39 cases each, while 35 COVID-19 cases were reported from Kandy, 29 from Kalutara, and 27 from Kurunegala. In addition, 65 cases of the novel coronavirus were recorded across 14 other districts. Meanwhile, 518 new COVID-19 infections have been reported so far today. In the meantime, there were 2 COVID-19 fatalities in Sri Lanka yesterday, which takes the country's death toll to 435. Both victims were identified as men who were of the ages 66 and 78.
රසායනාගාරවලදී කොරෝනා රෝගීන් කියලා නිශ්චිතව PCR පරීක්ෂණයෙන් පළවෙනි වතාවට හඳුනා ගන්න රෝගීන් සංඛ්‍යාව සහ නිල වශයෙන් බලධාරීන් විසින් ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරන රෝගීන් සංඛ්‍යාව අතර 5000ක විතර වෙනසක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ රෝගීන් 5000ක් ආගියතක් නැහැයි කියන කාරණේ. නමුත් අද වෙනකන් සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ හෝ බලධාරීන් හෝ වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශයේ කිසිදු පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් දීලා නැහැ. ඊයේ දවස්වල මහජන සෞඛ්‍ය පරීක්ෂක මහතුරුන්ගේ සංගමය විසින් තාම නිවැරදිව සහ පැහැදිලිව කියනවා මේ බිම් මට්ටමේ සිදුවෙන මරණ වලින් සැලකිය යුතු ප්‍රමාණයක් සංඛ්‍යාලේඛන විදියට ඒ හරහා මතුවලා තියෙන තත්ත්වය තමයි සෞඛ්‍ය වෘත්ති කියන්නේ සෞඛ්‍ය දැඩි අපහසුතාවයට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. දැන් උදමු උදාහරණේ ගමක මරණයක් සිද්ධ වුණාට පස්සේ ඒ මරණය කොවිඩ් කියලා PCR පොසිටිව් වෙලා තහවුරු වුණාට පස්සේ අවශ්‍ය කරන ක්‍රියාමාර්ග අරගෙන මරණය ගෙදර ගේන්නේ දෙන්න නැතුව පැය කිහිපයක් ඇතුළත ආදාහනය කරනවා. ආගමික වතාවත් කරන්න ඉඩ දෙන්නේ නැහැ. අවසානයේදී අපි ජාතික මට්ටමින් සහ වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශ මගින් සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශ මගින් දත්ත ප්‍රකාශ වෙනකොට ඒ ගමේ සිද්ධ වෙච්ච මරණය ඒ දත්ත පත්‍රිකාවට ඇතුළත් වෙන්නේ නැත්තම් ඒතකොට ඒක කොවිඩ් මරණයක්ද නැද්ද කියන සැකසංකාව ඥාතීන් තුල එනවා. බරපතල ගැටුම්කාරී තත්ත්වයක් මේ හරහා සමාජය සහ සෞඛ්‍ය වෘත්තිකයන් අතර ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මේ මරණ සම්බන්ධයෙන් පැහැදිලි කිරීම හරියට කළේ නැත්තම්.
In another development, the overall number of COVID-19 vaccinations that have been conducted in Sri Lanka surpassed 300,000 yesterday. According to the epidemiology unit, a total of 302,857 vaccinations have been carried out so far since the inoculation program got underway on the 29th of January. As such, 39,078 persons within the Western province were vaccinated against the virus yesterday. In the meantime, the number of persons who recovered from the novel coronavirus in Sri Lanka shot up by 843 today, taking the overall tally to 74,299. This places the number of active COVID-19 cases in the island at 5,264.
Now, in other news, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says that people have now come to regret the choices they made during the presidential and parliamentary elections. During another leg of opposition leader's mobile service, he said that the promise of free fertilizer is a gimmick and urged people to assess their own decision-making.
The 42nd phase of Satkarya, the mobile service of opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, was worked off yesterday in the area of Lunugamwehera in the Hambantota district.
දැන් මේ නොමිලේ පොහොර ලබා දෙනවා කියන එකත් මහා ප්‍රෝඩාවක් නේ. වෙනදට දුන්නු පොහොර ප්‍රමාණය නෙවෙයි ලබා දෙන්නේ. මොන තරම් අසාධාරණද? නොමිලේ දෙන පෝර සොච්චමක් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එදා ජනාධිපතිවරණයේ බොහොම ගැඹීරව ප්‍රකාශ කරා ඔක්කොම පෝර නොමිලේ දෙනවයි කියලා. හොඳින් හිතලා බලන්න ජනාධිපතිවරණෙත් මහමැතිවරණෙත් ගත්තු තීන්දුව හරිද? අද මුළු රටේම ජනතාවට සිද්ධ වෙලා තිබෙනවා ගත්තු තීන්දුව වලින් මහා දැවැන්ත පසුතැවිල්ලකට ලක් වෙනවා. දැන් එදා ජනාධිපතිවරණයේදී කොටසක් කිව්වා රටට අවශ්‍යයි කියලා අයෝමය පාලනය. දැන් ලැබිලා තියෙනවනේ අයෝමය පාලනය.
We'll see you shortly. Bear with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, market turnover levels are expected to be lower than 5 billion rupees during the coming trading week at the Colombo Bourse, which starts tomorrow. The all-share price index gained 61.58 points to close at 7,797.94 last Friday, with the S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks ending at 3,098.12 with a gain of 0.39. Here's Achyutan Srirangan to give an update on what we can expect at the CSE in the week ahead.
We feel for the next week the market will going through the volatile sentiment till the finding a direction, and we feel the turnover which is trading a very low turnover, less than a 5 billion turnover last week, will be resumed at the same amount for the next week also. The banking sector and the capital goods sectors are the sectors more active going to be the next week with a less foreign participation.
And that's it from all of us here at First 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.